God, social media wasn't a thing, really, when I was growing up. If you sleep with your phone on silent, then you're a maniac.
What?
Do you know what? Quite frankly, it's rude. It's rude. This brings me nicely over to predators. Predators of the internet. You're posting your holiday pics, your pictures of your kids growing up. Predators.
Mm.
You're literally giving them fuel. You know, I remember growing up, for me, there wasn't anywhere to do those things. So, you know, it used to be like the embarrassing photo albums would come out. Do you remember those days? The embarrassing photo album, pictures of you in the bath, or you know what I mean, playing it with your cousins when you're younger and stuff like that.
Oh God, I remember those days well.
These days, there's no point in doing that because you could just open a feed and it's there. People literally post this stuff online. You've embarrassed your kids not just in that moment, for life, because these pictures never disappear. And I just sort of think, why would you want to do that? If you recall how you grew up, why would you want to just ruin your kids' lives? Because that's essentially what you're doing. Or essentially ruining your own life, because I know that for myself, there is loads of pictures of my younger years and me doing some of the shame stuff. But luckily for me, the most shame stuff, there is no pictures of that. I mean, we all know the stories, but it's being able to tell the stuff. I know yours too, so don't even go there. It's being able to tell those stories and reminisce about that stuff without it being everywhere for everyone to know. Not to mention, like you said before about the health issues. So
yes. That's a big one.
Poor sleep, people going to bed with their phones, the blue screen issue, the screen issue, generally, lights. Depression, you said this, people are literally depressed because they're isolating themselves, isolation and loneliness. Anxiety, because the fear of missing out is real.
I also put on my list of negative effects on kids, exposure to adult content.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've not even gotten onto my kid bit yet.
Oh, we do.
Because I sort of feel like this is just general. Low self-esteem.
Yeah, we literally had a conversation 5 minutes before we started filming, saying like, are we going to keep it as social media effects towards kids? Because that was originally what we were going to do. And then we were like,
it's too big.
It's too big a topic. So we're just going to film for an hour and then split it into 2 parts. Because otherwise, you know, it's definitely too big to fit into a half-hour episode for sure.
But let me finish. So low self-esteem, which you won't get a positive self-esteem issues from people on the internet. You won't get positive things on the internet because with every positive comes 50 negatives. And human beings tend to remember the negatives more than we do the positives.
And people, when you've got somebody in front of you,
mm-hmm.
it's very different to having somebody online who you've never met before.
The keyboard warriors, they're perfect.
The politeness level of, no, I don't want to offend this person because they're looking at me, is very, very different. I mean, people even send text messages that they wouldn't send face-to-face, knowing that they're going to have to deal with the consequences of a text message. So imagine what it's like when it's completely anonymous, you don't know people.
Not to mention the loss of focus and concentration. Kids these days can barely keep it together in schools. Schools are a joke now. But we're going to do an episode on education at some point, so I'm going to save that till then.
And the exposure to adult content if we're talking about kids in general.
Yeah, generally.
And cyberbullying. Yeah. Well, this all ties in with what I'm saying.
But there's emotional issues, including body image issues. People don't want to... A filter... Look at the levels of plastic surgery. Back in my day,
in the Stone Age.
You're older than I am, might I add. So if I'm old, then you are in fact ancient.
And I've resigned myself to that.
Well, stop trying to bring me down with you.
I know that I'm old.
Stay over there,
seems like
old
it's
lady.
your issue.
No, it's a you issue. Anyway, you'll be dead soon. No, I'm joking. Unless I end you myself. Anyway, look. Anyway, that brings me nicely onto death, actually.
Suicide rates.
Suicide rates.
Sorry, are we allowed to say that on YouTube?
Well, I've already
to
said
use
it.
the S word?
Maybe not the S word, but you get the general gist. People ending themselves. Rates of that going through the roof. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I'll mention it here. The rates of antidepressant use in Europe is ridiculous. I know that we're depressed because of the weather and the economy, but it's not just that. Look at the Southport riots and how that was portrayed in the media, and all the rest of it. I mean, let's take a more famous example. George Floyd. Okay. In 2020, George Floyd he died in America. Okay. Killed by the police, whatever. This is not the time for that. Sound off in the comments about whether your opinions on that, but I'm just using this as an example. That went viral to the point where it started affecting and influencing people all around the world. Before we knew the facts, before we knew any information about any of the participants in the situation as it happened, we knew that an unarmed black man was killed by the police. That's all we knew. And that took it crazy. Now, we have different opinions on race and race-related issues, so we're not getting into that until we come to our episode on race, which we eventually will. But the virality of that just goes to show how global the internet is and how global the influence is. Because during the pandemic, bear in mind, this is like 2020, but not at the point yet where we knew whether this was a murdering disease or not. All right, this was at the point where we were in lockdown. All right, people took to the streets, regardless of what was going on. I don't know what that says about us. I mean,
and that I think also shows about the kinds of stuff that go viral as well. Anything that invokes outrage, anger, anything that evokes some sort of emotion. So you end up with these emotionally charged incidents. So let's use the George Floyd as an example. So after the George Floyd, there were, I think there were several other after, there were several other before. I think the reason why George Floyd went viral was because there was the video element of it. That's why it was the most famous one. But there have been several other ones that, if you follow politics, presumably you'll know about. But the media, the social media, the people that push it, choose to push certain things. And if that's all you see, so for example, if you're the kind of person that follows those kinds of stories, you would be led to be under the impression that a larger percentage of the black population are being killed by the police than is actually happening. In a similar way that when COVID happened, every day we were heard on the news about more deaths.
Yeah, the death rates.
They did a poll. They did a poll as the general population, asked them what percentage of the UK population had died through COVID, or how many people they thought had died, and the reality to what people thought was vastly different. There was a much less percentage of the population or number of people in the UK that actually died than the vast majority of people thought. And the reason for that is because that one thing had been pushed, and these stories are being cherry-picked and pushed with the help of algorithms to invoke certain reactions. And this, I know we mentioned it earlier, but this then brings us to the point of like, what is going to be the result of this in terms of the civil unrest? Like when you've got two camps, people, I mean, if you listen to people like, I don't know, Tim Pool or whoever who's been banging on about civil war for years.
I mean, I know whose side I am on in the race war.
It might not even be a race. It's probably not even going to be a race war.
It's probably a
It's not going to be a race war. It might be in America.
Not in this country. In America, which is a racialized society, I think it'd be probably more to be a... I don't know, though,
it's going to be a political war.
I think it's going to be a political war, yeah. I don't think that there's... I think it's going to be a political war. I agree.
Yeah.
I think so in the UK too, but also in the UK it's a bit of a different issue because I do think that there is potential for a race war in the UK.
I don't think so. I don't know.
I disagree. based on this sheer amount of radicalization that happens in the UK. And the UK is a small country, and our population size. If we just had 1 million people that rebelled, because of our population size, it would drag people in. So I think just look at Southport.
The sheer number of people that
look at Southport.
Yeah, but that happens in America too.
I'm
not saying you're over-egging the pudding with the UK. I'm saying you're under-egging the pudding with America.
Okay, I'm also saying that. I mean, I don't want to irk anyone's ire here, but the reality of the situation is we're divided by religious lines in the UK. We are divided by religious lines, and so when I talk about that, I mean that kind of war as opposed to anything else.
Oh yes, so you weren't talking about race at all. You were talking about religion.
Well,
it
is race.
No,
but there is race within that. I think it would come into play, but I think it would be started along the lines of religion. But anyway, tin hat, because right now there is the current situation for that, and we have bigger issues right now, like Putin. So go on, we have bigger issues.
I think that actually will get sorted out. I'm not overly concerned about Putin. Like, I mean,
I am now that America's given the go ahead for certain missiles.
Yes, but we've only got to hold out 2 months.
Anyway, stick to the topic. Get back to the topic.
Right. Okay, so solutions. Let's just do this. Solutions.
All right, solutions. Okay.
I didn't prep anything. Hang on. Before we go on to solutions, there's a couple of other things I wanted to cover dead quick.
Okay.
First of all, in terms of the effect on kids and stuff, I wrote down nurseries.
Oh, I've got loads for the effects on kids.
We talked about the addiction and stuff like that. We're now getting a lot of nursery school teachers saying that the minute you try and take an iPad off a child, they get violent in a way that has never really happened before when you try and take other toys off kids. So that just goes to show that playing with a toy car is not an addiction. An iPad is.
Can I just piggyback on the back of that and bring in dangerous trends into this and screen time? So I'll start with dangerous trends. I recall during the pandemic there was an issue with I didn't do my research into this because I remember at the time thinking that this was stupid, and I continue to think that people drinking bleach. Then there was the Tide tabs.
The what?
The Tide it's like an American detergent, and they have like pods, and people were eating the pods, Tide pods. I don't understand how in the age of information people have in fact gotten dumber.
Can I just say a couple of things on that?
You can, but let me just finish making my point on screen times just while I'm on because part of my solutions, but also part of the problem.
What's that to do with people drinking bleach?
It doesn't. It was just a separate issue, but I brought up 2 points. Screen times. Actually, it does, because part of it is stop spending so much time on the internet. Stop spending so much time on the internet. Use your common sense. But also in terms of screen time and in pertaining to children are dumb. Okay? We know that they're a blank slate. You have to model the behavior that you want from your child. And I firmly believe this. You cannot be sat at dinner table with your phone and then telling your kid to get off their phone. That makes no sense. So when I hear about people going, oh, I've limited their screen times, and have you limited your own screen time?
That is a very good point.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to say, I think the whole bleach thing suffered from, seeing as we've mentioned it, I'm going to call it the George Floyd effect.
Virality.
I think the actual number of people drinking bleach is probably less than 10. It is a ridiculously small number of people.
I hope so.
But the mainstream media latched onto it and spread it to make it think that it was a far greater issue than what it actually was. So, I mean, if you can imagine it, someone somewhere's doing it. But just, like, the world has not gone insane because, like, 3 people decided to drink bleach.
No, but it's not about that, though. It's about the influence. This brings me back nicely to influence. And on young minds. If we're talking about children and the way that they perceive things, do you know Do you know I have hello mine? They don't watch this because it's not for kids. But I have nieces and I have nephews. Okay. What I realize of them is they get very excited to show me things, to tell me things, but none of it's new to me, which is fine because I'm older than them. I'm old compared to them. They're a blank slate. Everything that they're learning on a day to day is so new and fantastic for them. It's not for me. So they're being influenced and learning things even within the school environment, because they're not allowed to bring their phone to school, but some kids do. They're looking at the it's constant. It's constant. So when I see my niece who is 8 using makeup stuff, that's not from anyone in her life. That's from the YouTube videos that she watches. I've seen it, and I've said, maybe we should stop doing it. But the point is, if it's your kid and you've got an influence over them, or you've got an influence over any child, you should be encouraging them to come off the internet. You should be encouraging them to limit their screen time. You should be looking at the things that they're looking at to make sure that, because some of the stuff that says for kids on YouTube, have you seen it? Oh my God. Let me tell you, one time I was sat there chilling in my parents' lounge. What's that, parents? And my niece was watching some thing with I don't remember what it's called. This black guy dressed in like white dungarees and like an orange top. Anyway, she was obsessed with it at the time. And what popped up in the video, so it was a YouTube video, and then in the middle of it was just like some crazy like sexual thing. Just popped up and disappeared, and the video carried on. I went back and I was like, why is this in a kid's video? And this is what I'm trying to say. You put YouTube for kids on and it's not kids videos. And I do think that social media companies need to take better responsibility.
But when you set up, like when we set up our YouTube channel,
yeah,
it tells you, is it for kids, yes or no?
Yeah.
So there's nothing to stop you from just clicking yes, it's for kids, even if you know it's not. There's nothing to stop you from doing that.
So then this is my question then. Whose responsibility is it? Because I don't believe in so much government interference. I believe that it's an individual responsibility. They are your children. Protect them. Protect them. And that's from seen and unseen things. That means if they're watching something, you need to know what it is that they're watching. What you were saying before about these kids in nursery with these screens and stuff, that's learned at home. They didn't start off at nursery.
And the kids get angry, so instead of the parents doing parenting and taking it off them, they don't want to have to deal with it, so they give it back.
Emotional issues.
So these kids, it's learned behaviour to think, if I screech, if I hit somebody, I'm going to get my device back. And it is like these kids are now 2, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. They are suffering what I would term withdrawal symptoms, to the point where they feel like they need it and they get angry and agitated and they're hitting out at their teachers, physically hitting out if they don't get it. And these teachers are saying, we've never experienced anything like this before. It's nuts.
I can't get on board with it.
And the other thing, right? Did you know that WhatsApp has a 16 age limit on it?
No.
WhatsApp has a 16 age limit on. Most other social media platforms like Facebook and all that are 13. You have to be 13 to go on Facebook. You have to be 13 to go on Twitter. You have to be 16 to use WhatsApp. You have to be 13 to go on Instagram. That ain't happening. And what's more, these Facebook companies are fully aware of it. Well, actually, that's a good point. I'm not actually sure. I'd imagine the ages would be different in different countries.
But either way, they're not doing anything
these companies are deliberately targeting kids in countries knowing that the kids are breaking the law in order to access these platforms.
But then this then brings me to where the government does need to step in, because corporations in this country pay minimal tax. Okay, corporation tax in the UK is not high.
It's 25%.
It used to be 0. It's not that high. Not when you think about
compared to a lot of other countries.
They're not even so. They're not influencing. The government isn't influencing them the way, say, the Chinese government.
I mean, it's 25% before national insurance tax and all these other things.
But let me finish this. The way that the Chinese government influences Tencent, who owns TikTok. Or is it Tencent that owns them, or is it Bitbot? Either way, the Chinese government have banned Facebook and all the rest of it. They've got their own social media, WeChat, which is monitored by the government. I mean, I'm not saying that we need to be going 1984 and giving people social points, which is what the Chinese have started doing. We don't need to be doing that. We already live in a 1984 culture, by the way, because we're surveilled in every situation. And I think people don't realise this. Everything you do on the internet, any little click that you make, is in fact recorded somewhere. That's not to say that some crazy weirdo has stood there peering through that's not happening, but it's being recorded somewhere.
Yeah, even if no physical human being is checking it, it's still being recorded and they could access the data should they choose to.
It's being flagged. So anything you do is being recorded. There are ways to protect yourself on the internet, but they're not sponsoring us, so I'm not going to say anything. But the point is, you know, people, they're not paying enough attention to their kids and what they're doing. They don't pay enough attention to them. We saw this through the pandemic where people just did not know how to cope with their own kids. I said this before, about this time I was working in children's services, and what I saw was quite literally a lot of people that did not know how to cope with their own kids. They send them to school, and regardless of the behaviours that they exhibit in school, it's their school's problem. It's the school's problem. We've become a society of, that's your issue. That's not my issue, that's your issue. You're raising your kids, you birthed them, you chose to have them. You should be having more of an interest in all the things that come along with them.
So that's interesting. My friend Kat, who lives in Cambridge.
Hey Kat,
Hi,
Pagan Kat.
Pagan Kat, indeed. Her mum is a retired primary school teacher. And Kat told me once that her mum would get frustrated because her mum would, during parents' evening, the parents would sit in front of her mum and say, "Why is my child's vocabulary so shit?" And Kat's mum would basically say, "Well, what are you talking to your child about?" And it turned out, once she dug a little bit deeper, that the answer to that question was nothing.
Mm.
Or they'd be talking at them and there'd be no engagement back. Like, if you're a teacher, you have 30 kids in a class. You don't have the time to be increasing the, like, learning doesn't just finish at 3:30 or whatever time it is schools shut these days. It's constant and it's 24 hours. And a lot of parents today think they can just check out or give their child a device in order to keep them occupied, which is not helping them build their self-esteem. It's not helping them learn. It's helping the parents deal with the fact that they don't have an annoying 10-year-old following them around everywhere they go. But that's not how you raise people, essentially. Right, let's move on.
But
solutions.
So this brings me on to nicely to some solutions. So the big one for me is paying attention to your kid to find the answer to the question: is your child ready for the internet? Are they ready for all the positives and negatives that come with that? Are they clued in enough to reality to be able to handle being in a cyber reality? Will they conflate the two? Do they have enough maturity to deal with all the things that come along with that? And that's something that requires you to have a conversation with your kids to figure out, or to know them enough to figure it out. Stop giving... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and push back on some of the stuff they come out with.
Yeah.
Even if you 100% agree, "Oh, look, I've been looking at politics today, Daddy, and I've discovered X, Y, Z," and you 100% agree with everything that child's come out with, push back, give some counterpoints to see how they deal with that, to see what responses they get, to see if they're thinking about it at all. Teach people how to think critically.
And in terms of, like, sort of early intervention is better than trying to solve... Prevention is better than solution. Okay. If you see that your kid is sort of expressing these radical thoughts, or things that go far out the social norms, or things that are low self-esteem, or not wanting to, for example, eat with the family or things like that, you as a parent need to get that kid some mental health help.
We didn't have a choice.
No.
Growing up, we didn't have a choice. It was, no, this is dinner time and you will sit down every night around the table for dinner. And that was like, and it never occurred to me that in other households, people would eat their tea in front of the TV.
Okay, I have Jamaican parents. I should leave that there. But get your kids some mental health support and don't shy away from that. That's not to say that they need CAMS or straight away into secondary. No. There are mental health in schools teams. Just get your kid to speak to someone. If they're not comfortable speaking to you, ask yourself why.
And don't get offended if they're not comfortable speaking to you.
No.
It might have absolutely nothing to do with you. It might just be the fact that every one of the people in their network at school has been saying, oh, I can't talk to my mother about that. And that's drummed it in that kid that they can't talk to their parents about that for whatever reason.
And if necessary, counselling. Because it's better to prevent these issues before they become big issues. It's better to prevent your kid than your kid be referred to prevent, which is the radicalisation anti-terrorism branch. And
which is a bit useless anyway, to be fair.
But any child, any person can be referred into that. And I sort of think, do not wait for there to be an issue before you act. And this is, take interest in your children. We're talking specifically about children here, but generally...
And we are talking specifically as two people who don't have any kids.
Of
just
course.
to put that out there.
But also, take interest in your friends. Take interest in their lives. Take interest in the people around you. Go out and touch some grass. Go and talk to people like actual, in real life, human people.
To quote Jordan Peterson, if you want to change the world, set your own affairs in order first.
Exactly, and in terms of that, just know that more government interference is not going to help you in the long run. Individual choices, make better choices.
That's the next question. Do you think there should be?
No, I don't think there should be. I think that there's enough laws around the internet, and the way that the internet is now is not the way that the internet was when I was growing up anyway. Things change.
Do you know what I realised?
That you're old as fuck.
No, that's not a new revelation to me.
Oh, go on.
I've been thinking that for the last 20 years.
I agree. Go on.
What happened to these positives you were going to mention?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, the positives.
Oh, fine.
Okay, so this is what I think.
Globalization.
Globalization, it allows you to stay in contact with people. For me, anyway. It allows me to stay in contact with people that I met... Shock, horror, IRL, right? It allows me to stay in contact with people that I met in America. It allows me to listen, to have the opportunity to talk to people and exchange ideas with people that I otherwise wouldn't have got to meet. I love listening. I love listening to different people with different ideas, and I don't like listening to people that have nothing interesting to say. So, example, Meetup is a fantastic app. I went to the Flat Earth Meetup.
They're not sponsoring us. Go on.
I went to the Flat Earth Meetup in January.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. And it was, you know what? I mean, you go and you chat to people, and you've just. I wasn't there to try and de-radicalize anybody. I was just there to learn how these people have come to the conclusions that they've come to. And what I found really interesting, there was a lot of people in the room that came to that conclusion because of what they lived through COVID. So a lot of people... So this is interesting, because for me, just because I agree with a lot of what the Flat Earthers were saying about COVID. Yes, the government lied to us about certain things. Yes, the vaccines were being pumped out and they were lying about various things. But just because they lie about one thing, don't mean they lie about everything. And that's, I think, the trap that a lot of the Flat Earthers fell down into. And it's very easy. Like, I remember having a 3-hour-long debate in Texas with a Flat Earther. And then he was like, you don't know. And I was trying my best to argue. And I had fantastic points. Obviously, I had fantastic points. But he knew his points as well. And in the end, he was like, look, you don't know because you've not looked into it. And he was like, you know what? He's right. I mean, there's nothing I can say about that. He was right. I hadn't. So when I got back to the UK, I was like, radicalised me, YouTube. I'm going down this rabbit hole. I mean, I still wasn't convinced. But at least now I can... I'm not suggesting everybody goes off and does that, obviously. But I can't even remember what the point I was making was. Oh, yeah. The ability to exchange ideas with people and have interesting conversations, because I find it interesting to have conversations with wacky people about chemtrails. I find it fascinating. I love a good conspiracy theory. I rarely buy into them, but I love them.
I mean, I love a good conspiracy theory. I do think the government's against us, but whatever.
And the government doesn't help themselves, because they do. Like, I find it very difficult, as an example, to find any videos on YouTube that were made by actual flat earthers, because the algorithms have made it so that they don't want the flat earther conspiracy theory to be pushed. So all the videos I found on YouTube were basically, this is why flat earthers are wrong, or taking the piss out of flat earthers. There was nothing actually told by a flat earth perspective, because the algorithms wouldn't show it to me. So when the flat earthers are stood about going, well, they are pressing us, they're not letting our voices be heard, and they're not wrong, but the conclusion of, because we're telling the truth, that's the wrong bit. But the first bit of they're oppressing us and they don't want our voices to be heard and the algorithm's going against it, that is true, because that's what I found.
But anyway, generally, I'll just say the last positive, which is literally communication. That's the only good positive I can think of. Information,
and that is a good reason for kids to have devices.
Availability for all information. I know that they've started using all this stuff in schools now. It's given people in the age of technology new career paths. I know that my nephew wants to be a coder, and I think he'll do it. He's very determined, but I honestly think that they're the only positives.
I would add another positive: time. It's a great time saver.
Could it be an email? Which is
email, whether, these WhatsApp voice notes.
Yeah, voice notes.
Certainly, I mean, phoning somebody easily gets you distracted from the thing you actually want to say, whereas a quick voice note will do the job. You don't have to bother with the hi, how are you, sorry I'm phoning, just a quick blah blah, straight to the point. You're not having to ring taxis. You can use. There's an app for that.
There's an app for everything.
It's the ability to find jobs that you would be necessarily unavailable to. People can now work from home, which means that if there's no jobs in their local area, that doesn't hinder them to the same extent as it would have hindered them however many years ago as a result of the internet and social media. And social media are advertising a lot of things like that. You can buy a house on Facebook these days. You can, people exchange goods. There's a couple of websites,
marketplace, that
literally say, I've got this, does anybody want it, and it's free of charge, and you just go and pick it up and things like that. So it definitely, and the Meetup app I mentioned earlier, that is also a social media platform. So it does. And that is specifically, there are online events hosted on Meetup as well, but a lot of them are in-person events, so you can use social media to advertise touching grass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that note, the positive, we're going to end it here, but join us next time when we'll be discussing another topic. Thank you.
I'll see you next time, guys.
Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our views. That's the point of the conversation. Join in.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.